Sri Sisodia to deliver the lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor S. Mahendra Dev, who is chair for today's program. Professor S. Galap, the director, IDS KP. Professor Nagbhushan Rao, my dear friend. All the participants for this Zoom conference, I welcome you all. A very good afternoon to you. Now, today's topic is about the philosophy of Indian independence movement. This sounds a bit puzzling for many of us as to what could be the philosophy that we can talk about when it comes to independence movement, since everyone who was under subjugation or some kind of foreign occupation would strive to gain independence from the occupying forces. But here I would like to basically point out that all these significant events that happen in history today, in past or in future, would have certain philosophical and ideological underpinnings. Without the concrete thinking, without understanding what is going on and identifying the root cause or the fundamental issues that concern you, and then you try to address them, is basically like looking at the foundation or the fundamentals of a particular event. To give you an example, World War II actually was based on a philosophy, and that philosophy was created by one philosopher by name Friedrich Nietzsche. This philosophy was slightly distorted by Hitler. And when Nietzsche talks about the Übermensch or the Superman, Hitler understood it as the superiority of the race. And he said that Aryan race is superior to others and Jews have no right to survive because they are an inferior race. This, along with certain historical factors, led to one of the most important events in the history of the world, wherein more than 20 million people perished and almost 6 million Jews perished. This kind of event has happened because without the underlying causes or without the underlying philosophical narrative, it is very difficult to actually describe an event or understand the nuances of a particular event. Now, philosophy, what exactly I understand from philosophy is that I would say that philosophy is the why of the learning dimension. All the disciplines, while they will be what and how, the philosophy tries to understand the why part of the dimension, which is the most important dimension of any particular learner. When a child in the first class asks a teacher as to, teacher, why the moon doesn't shine in the daytime, what he is doing is actually grappling with philosophy. And all our honored lecturers and professors are aware that the highest degree that is granted in any discipline is PhD. PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy. Now, I used to wonder as to why you don't call it Doctor of Hindi or Doctor of Geology or Doctor of History or Doctor of this. Why do you say Doctor of Philosophy in bracket Hindi, Doctor of Philosophy in bracket Geography? That's because when you are at the highest point of learning, you are not trying to find out the what or how of the thing, you are trying to go into the why of it. So, having said that, the Professor Mahendra Dev has actually contextualized my speech by understanding what I would be talking about when I talk about the independence movement, because India's independence movement or the freedom struggle was a unique event in the history of the world. It's a unique event. As he has himself said, Churchill, not only Churchill, everyone, the entire world was actually very suspicious and very doubtful about success of India as an independent nation, as a free nation. Everybody had doubts. They used to say idiots will start ruling the country. The British used to say the Indians are not capable of self-rule. Indians can never make of a successful nation. We have proved them wrong. And how we have proved them wrong, what has gone into proving them wrong would be basically constituting the talk that I'm going to deliver. But before that, I want to make a very clear-cut distinction between freedom struggle and independence movement. What we are talking about, I am talking about the independence movement of the country. Freedom struggle was an event in the history which had a definite beginning and a definite end. It ended on 47th August 1947, 15th August 1947. But the independence movement, and these views are my personal, and because it is an intellectual forum, I have to be very candid and very free in saying what I would feel like saying. I make a distinction between the independence movement and the freedom struggle. Freedom struggle started and ended with the country becoming free. But what we gained was the political independence. We became politically independent. We decided that we will have a constitution. We will give ourselves a constitution, which we did in 1950. In 1950, we gave ourselves the constitution. The world was very apprehensive. After gaining independence, India would not be able to survive as a nation. There is also a debate into which I would not go as to whether India is a nation or a country. Because basically India is a country comprising of several nations. But that's an issue of a separate topic as of now. However, when India became a country, when Indians started realizing that they belong to a country or a nation, when this kind of a feeling of belonging to a common identity started, is again a debatable point. Some people might say that since the beginning of the history, India was a country and it was a nation. Some people would say that India actually started recognizing itself as a country or a nation after the British occupied it. Prior to that, there were different empires, there were different kingdoms, there were different principalities. People had their own way of life. Whether they had this idea of belonging to a particular nation or not is a debatable idea. Now, prior to the sea voyages having started in the world, all the people who came via the land route, either to attack or to trade, they used to come from the Sindhu River, crossing Sindhu River, Hindu Kush mountains, a few passes, Khyber Pass, etc. used to be there. They would come. Every time they would take this route of the passes. The world which was on the west side of the Indus River, Indus was called Sindhu by us and Hindu by the Arabs and the Iranians and the Persians. All the people who were living beyond Indus River were called Hindus. This term came from there, which our religion also, we say that it is a Hindu religion. But the term origin is that it is identified with the Indus River, which was called Sindhu River, those places. So since then, one can say that this subcontinent was actually a country or a nation. To what extent would that be true is a point which I am not able to fully understand, because Winston Churchill, to quote him again, said that India qualifies to be a nation as much as the line of equator does. So he actually compared India with the line of equator. If the line of equator has a claim to nationhood, India also would have a claim to nation, because India comprises so many races. We have three major races of the world represented here. We have Aryan languages, we have Dravidian languages, we have so many religions, and so many castes. And it is such a completely fractured sort of a society that it will be very difficult those days to understand India as a country. However, we had certain attributes which qualified us as a country. We had common scriptures, we had Vedas which were accepted till the tip of the Indian subcontinent. We also had uh, some empires which had almost come to the point of occupying the entire territory. There was Samudragupta, then there was Ashoka, then the Mughal Empire came. The Aurangzeb's rule was the, as far as geographical territory is concerned, Aurangzeb's empire was the largest, biggest, and it comprised almost entire India, except for a few in the south or some in the west. So, at some point of time, there was this nebulous sort of an idea that, whether you are from south or from east or west, some kind of a common identity was there. Adi Shankaracharya uh, undertook journey of the entire country. He established 4 dhams. He brought in the Advait Vedanta, and he tried to propagate this, and he sort of conceived of the entire country as a single nation. And these kind of efforts continued. Eventually, the British came. They first came as a trading company. Later, this company was taken over by the empire, and India became a colony of the British. At that point of time, when there was a common ruler in the entire country, at that point of time, perhaps it was a fallout that everybody started understanding that we belong to a country. And this is sort of a, one can say, side effects of British Empire, that a common identity, a very coherent and concrete common identity emerged. And this common identity eventually was responsible for throwing the British out. Then came Mahatma Gandhi. Before the advent of Mahatma Gandhi, or before the appearance of Mahatma Gandhi on the freedom struggle scene, what happened or what took place were sporadic events, sporadic violent events, sporadic attempts at overthrowing the British government. Some armed revolts took place in different parts of the country. The first war of independence, which was called the Sepoy Mutiny by the British, they were also partly justified in calling it a Sepoy Mutiny. We are also justified in calling it first war of independence, but the fact remains, and the history proves, that it was not a mass movement. It was a movement wherein a revolt took place because a particular cartridge had a certain portion of fat and was religiously not acceptable to some sepoys. And eventually this movement, when it started, 1847, then the principalities, the kings and the some of the principalities, some of the kings joined hands, and some of the nationalists also joined hands. And well, it was quelled eventually. So mass movement would mean that every person who is there under the British subjugation, who is there under the British rule, would feel a need to throw out the British. That wasn't the case in the 19th century. That started taking shape in the 20th century. So what I'm actually trying to point out is that first, the idea that India is a nation is an idea, when it originated and when it concretized, is a debatable. Number two idea is that this concrete identity, once it was established, how, why and when it occurred that British rule is not suitable for us, and we need self-rule. Now, self-rule, Swarajya, is very different than Purna Swaraj. Initially, there were two main factions in the nationalists who were sort of fighting for the country's independence. There were the moderates and there were the militant, those who had advocated a militant strategy or a violent revolution to overthrow the British. So, this part, the moderates were represented eventually by Mahatma Gandhi, but to begin with Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, etc. The other side was represented or sort of, advocated by different people that included Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Chandrasekhar Azad, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru, so many of them. Now, there was a clash between them too. It was a clash of philosophies. It was a clash of ideologies. One advocated that we should achieve Swaraj by peaceful means. One advocated that a baton must be met with a baton. A gun must be countered with a gun. Now, these conflicting ideological standpoints were there. Different, lot of discussions that took place, and eventually, and when it was a violent revolution or violent kind of struggle, it was sporadic, limited to a particular area, a particular event happens. And it was very difficult for all of them to come together and try to collectively overthrow the British government by force or by violence. As opposed to that, Swaraj basically meant self-rule. In the beginning, actually, the moderates, their original aim or objective or target was only to achieve Swaraj, self-rule, or some kind of a dominion status. The dominion status had a very different connotation. It was a free nation. However, it owed allegiance to the British and the British Empire. The Canada got the dominion status, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. And in the beginning of the freedom movement, in the beginning of the 20th century, the idea was that the moderates' idea was that slowly, incrementally, we should try to bargain with the British to gain Swaraj or the self-rule. And later, that was replaced with the Purna Swaraj or complete self-rule or independence. Now, that came much later. Now, I tried going into the history of the independence struggle, and what strikes me more is actually the role that is played by Mahatma Gandhi in this entire freedom struggle. In the beginning, when I was a student, of course, I'm not a student of history, I'm a science student, but I had the curiosity to figure out because there was a lot of frustration that was there. I read about independence when civil disobedience movement was withdrawn after Chora Chori incident. There was a lot of frustration in the cadre. Why, at the last moment, when we are on the verge of achieving success, you are calling it off. And there was also, the opposing standpoint at times. Mahatma Gandhi was called the agent of the British by some people. I tried understanding it. That's why the core of my argument today is going to be what philosophy Gandhi had and what philosophy went into making of the independent India, which we are doing. Gandhi understood the fact that we are a huge country. He also understood the fact that we are divided on caste lines, on religious lines, on so many lines. He also understood the fact that we are being economically exploited. In order for the movement to become mass movement, what must be done was his first attempt at understanding the entire struggle. How do we make this not a movement of merely Brahmins or Kshatriyas, not a movement of only the landed gentry, which is actually far more virulently opposed to the British rather than the common folk. Because common folk, the agriculturists, they hardly had anything to do with the empires. Mughal used to collect 40% lagan, the British used to collect 35, 40. And how does it matter? An agriculturist is an agriculturist. He is happy as long as his farm is not being touched, as long as bountiful rains are there. He is this. He took the idea of Swaraj to the masses. He undertook so many several journeys and he undertook the tours of the entire country, held several meetings, held several agitations. And every agitation, when it was on the point of success, it was withdrawn. Because what I feel that just like a man is supposed to have a spirit or a soul, a nation too needs to have a spirit and a soul. Until unless you understand that this is the soul of this country, unless it is ripened, unless it is mature, there is no point. This is the way I look at it, because I also look at the colonies which gained independence at that point of time. In the 20th century, first half of the century, most of the countries, most of the colonies had become independent from French occupation, Portuguese, British, Spanish. Today, if we look at it, and if we really try to map it, what is third world? It's essentially that those colonies that are constituted. What are the developing economies? What are the economies and polities which are suffering? Which are the economies which are suffering heavily from the financial crisis? These are the colonies. Africa, right from the beginning, it was called a dark continent. It remains a dark continent. The nations, they gained independence. Countries gained independence. The colonial powers divided Africa into 4 or 5 parts. This is yours, this is yours. The concept of nation, the concept of a national identity, the concept of belonging to the patriotism, nationalism. You have the dictators ruling somewhere. You have the armies taking over somewhere. Economy is in shambles. The world at times is coming to the rescue by aid, sometimes not. The Latin American countries also more or less, except for Brazil, their fate remains the same. Brazil also is some kind of a political turmoil now. But rest of the nations, they suffered huge economic challenges. The inflation remains a huge concern there today also. And it will continue to be so in times to come. The drug is a big challenge. When you see the Middle East, the Eastern Asian nations, again, there are issues there. The communist revolutions are separate. Russia and China somehow, they were never colonies and they had some kind of a brush and fights with them, but the fate of colonies remain like. If you come near our country, look around the neighbors and see what's happened. Afghanistan is almost gone back to the dark ages. Pakistan, it's a failed state. This side, if you see, Bhutan is an isolated state, but otherwise, Nepal, Bangladesh, they have their own problems. Burma, again, went to the military junta. Sri Lanka is a problem. If you gain independence, if you are not mature enough, and you gain independence, what do you do with that? Perhaps that was the reason that he was in no hurry to gain independence. He was more in a hurry to create a situation, an atmosphere wherein you would be ripe enough for becoming an independent nation, and you would make a mark and you would succeed tomorrow. They said, British said that India will never succeed as a nation. It will balkanize. It will fall apart. It will fall in pieces. The idiots will not be able to rule. It's a different matter today that a person of Indian origin is ruling that country. That's an irony. That's also some kind. However, the fact remains that India the mass movement started with Swadeshi, with Satyagraha, and with eventually the Quit India, and finally it led to the freedom. The democracy has taken firm roots in the country. When we gained independence and when we drafted the constitution, and the world first of all started questioning universal suffrage, a country which is mired in poverty, which is mired in illiteracy, which is mired in ignorance. How can you give universal suffrage? How can you make everybody eligible to vote? Britain, which was supposed to be a very advanced nation in terms of democracy, civil rights, and all. In that country, it was only in 1928 that the women got right to vote. A country which had the 500 years of democracy behind it gave rights to women to vote only in the year 1928. And we gave women right to vote immediately after independence. That's the difference. And how it came about? It was the spirit of the, what do you call, the nation. Somewhere, somehow, we grappled with issues, we faced challenges, but eventually we came out. We came out successful. We are the largest democracy of the world today, and we should be proud of it. But going back to the actual, the events that led to the independence and all that, I'm not actually undermining the contribution of other freedom fighters, since I'm not talking about the event as such. I'm not talking about the history or chronology. All the nationalist leaders, all the patriots, they had this. But Mahatma Gandhi was essentially engaged in creating a philosophy which would create a successful nation. And he was influenced by different personalities, most influenced by, it's for the researchers who were there. There was this, one was Henry David Thoreau, the John Ruskin, and Leo Tolstoy. Now, Leo Tolstoy was a very interesting personality, and he actually shared so many letters, and they exchanged. Gandhiji and Leo Tolstoy exchanged so many letters, and eventually he was convinced that civil disobedience is the best way, love for everyone. Now, that is also a very debatable point as to, he used to say, you love those who kill you. I mean, at some point of time, he used to go to extra length to say that love will win your enemy also. That's a questionable point. My only argument is that the circumstances in any case were building. After World War II, Britain was in no position to hold on to the country. It was an inevitability. They understood their resources had dwindled. They were no longer able to control their colonies. And also, the kind of exploitation they could do in the beginning of the empire was not possible. And there was a challenge of Swadeshi again. Because if you are not consuming the British products, then what is the point of holding on a colony which is no longer a market? Now, interestingly, the colonialism and imperialism too had a philosophy. And that's a very interesting point here. When you say white man's burden, that was the philosophy which sort of legitimized and gave some kind of legitimacy and moral right to those people to go and colonize. Why are you colonizing? Why are you occupying? Because they are uncivilized people. They are ignorant people. They do not know anything. We will teach them. We will teach them civility. We will teach them civilization. We will teach them administration. That is the kind of argument. So this is a white man's burden to occupy, subjugate the black and the brown and the yellow, as they used to call Chinese, the Mongoloid race, yellows, that you have to occupy. That was the philosophy. We had a philosophy that we would win the freedom through non-violence, through peaceful agitation, incremental wrenching of the liberties and the concessions from them, and go for Purna Swaraj at some point of time. And that is why perhaps I think democracy has become successful. For want of time, I would be able to speak much on the political independence, because I'll have to speak about economic independence a little. The India was a country of famines, right from the days of British. There were huge famines wherein millions of Indians perished. There was nothing to eat. Rain-fed agriculture, poor quality of lands, poor quality of soil, and ancient means of tools, and also the exploitation coupled with that. It led to huge famines. At the time of independence and after that, India was dependent on other nations for support. Even the food, even the rice, even the wheat, wheat used to come from, we were not self-sufficient. Now, when I say free and independent, why I make a distinction is because you are free to die of hunger. But if you are asking food from someone else, you are dependent on him. You are not independent. So, while we gained political independence in 1947, we became a democratic republic in 1950. The economic independence has taken a long time. The long time, the first of the most important event here is the Green Revolution. India started suffering lots of famines after independence. While Nehru was engaged in creating the temples of modern India and was trying to create a huge irrigation projects, which of course led to a lot of dividends later. But immediately, what should be done? So there was this. Now again, if political independence was led by some people here, there was this father of Green Revolution, and he invited Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. He invited Norman Borlaug from the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center. And they started toying with the idea of introducing new variety crops which will lead to more dividends, and India should become food self-sufficient. India became food self-sufficient after 1961 when they started this green revolution. Then initially it was with the rice. Punjab state was selected for introducing the new varieties of wheat, maize, rice. They were introduced, they were found successful. Finally, IR8 dwarf variety, semi dwarf variety was introduced. Slowly, India became food independent. And today, India is a major rice exporter. We are exporting 4.5 million tons of rice abroad. Actually, a lot of nations are now dependent on us when it comes to food. And the food self-sufficiency has also led to enhancement of our uh, self-image, our prestige in the community of international nations, because we now are able to bargain on an equal footing with the nations when we go for the negotiations on the trade tariffs, etc. It was followed by the White Revolution. In the meanwhile, successive prime ministers, the first prime minister, of course, he was responsible for giving this country the major industries, the major dams, the major educational institutions. So India sort of slowly, uh, like toddler steps, it started moving towards that. And after liberalization came, IT revolution came and the telecom revolution happened, then now there is no looking back. We can very safely say, because in a globalized economy, one cannot be completely independent, but we are definitely independent as far as economy is concerned. Uh, the another kind of independence, which is again very important for all of us, is the social independence. Now, social independence means, what independence means is that every citizen of the country is independent. If a country can be completely independent only if every citizen is independent. And in India, we know that there is this Chaturvarna Vyavastha. There was a Purusha Sukta written in Rig Veda, which talks about Chaturvan, four Varnas. Society is divided into four Varnas. Brahmins came from Purushas. Purusha is the cosmic man, cosmic being. Brahmins originated from the head, Kshatriyas from the arms, shoulders, the Vaishyas from the stomach or the waist, and feet, Shudras. Then this social system had a fifth category, which is Ati Shudra, which is not part of the one cluster, which is actually not part of it. They are the untouchables in the country. Now, when you talk about social independence, and when you say everybody should be independent, then to that extent we can say that we are not independent those days. What should be now, how that independence should be brought about? So there was a Messiah born in Maharashtra, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. Now, he took up this challenge, this cause, that if one third of the population, which became one half after Mandal Commission, if one third of the population is actually having no freedom, no independence, how can you call this country independent? You must do something. If everybody is independent, then only we say that India is started a big movement. The historical events happened. There was this uh, the caste system uh, continued. During his time, it was much worse. Untouchability was slowly removed. In some pockets of the country, even now there is untouchability. However, there was this conflicting philosophies and ideologies of Mahatma Gandhi and Baba. They never had any kind of a meeting ground. There was not any way you could reconcile two different. Mahatma Gandhi also started the same social independence when he started the campaign against untouchability. When he started, by example, showing people that you should be able to do all the works. Brahman, Kshatriya, Shudra, Vaishya, they are not different categories. Everyone is inclusive of these Chaturvarnas. That was his way of dealing with the issues. The Dr. Ambedkar's way of dealing with the issues was to grapple the thing, uh, grab the bull by horns and just try to see. So he started several agitations and movements. Most significant event of the social independence movement in the country was when in the 1990 Government of India Act was enacted, and it proposed a what you call communal electorates. Communal electorates would basically mean that different communities will have different electorates. Some of us may understand if we give example of the legislative council. In legislative council, you have different electorates. So teachers are electorate for an MLC. It's a teacher MLC. Only teachers are voters. Here, it would be some kind of a vertical segregation of the electorate of the constituencies, by which the Muslims will vote for a Muslim MP, the scheduled caste will vote for a scheduled caste, the scheduled tribe will vote. That was called and this actually culminated in the form of the communal award, which was announced by the British government in 1932. this communal award based on the population percentage of that particular community. It gave them the elect. So Dalits will get 50 seats, Muslims will get 15. Like that, they divided. Mahatma Gandhi was in Yerwada jail that time, and then he started a fast into that. He was not willing to accept this thing. So then he started fast unto death, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was compelled to go and negotiate, and eventually it led to the what you call the Pune Pact, wherein what we are finding today is the Pune Pact in effect means you have reservation, you have a flat sort of an electoral electorate system, but in that different constituencies are reserved. That is the kind of system that we are following. Now, has India gained social independence? Are we completely free? I would say no, because the caste system is a very peculiar sort of a gift of the providence to this country. It is like, the best example I can give is that of coronavirus. The moment you discover a drug or you discover a vaccine, it mutates itself. So, the what was the original form of a caste system? It doesn't exist anymore now. But like a virus, at no cost will die. The caste system will at no cost die because it will keep metamorphosing. It will keep mutating. Today, it's the best instrument of political mobilization. We can't deny that. Any state you go, the most advanced state also, caste is the most potent instrument of political mobilization. It will continue like that. After Mandal Commission, things have changed drastically. Now Supreme Court and High Courts have to come down on the governments because they are going to cross reservations beyond 50%. You are going beyond Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, even Andhra at point of time, Telangana. They are going beyond, and the demand for reservation is coming up again and again and again. So this is a kind of a churning, and I would say that this struggle is still continuing. It will continue for all times. Coming to the end of my lecture, I would only like to say a few things about the intellectual independence and close my talk. Independence basically means not being dependent on anything. Constitution says that we should all develop scientific temper, spirit of inquiry. Do not accept anything without testing it, without getting it proved. It is not necessary that you put your finger in the fire to prove that yes, a fire burns. I mean, it is possible to understand by deduction, by logic, by application of instruments, everything experimented is possible. But unfortunately, in the country, we are still so much dependent on so many things. I would call what we can't establish or prove and still believe. I would say that is false knowledge. There is something called true knowledge which can be proved. There is something called false knowledge which you believe, which is faith, something which we have not seen, encountered, or experimented. Still, if we believe in that and act upon that, leading to certain negative consequences, I'm not going to elaborate because it might become a subject of huge debate between people. But I would only say that we should try not to teach false knowledge to our children, because we are all a lot of professors and lecturers have joined this event. So I would only request that we should develop scientific temper. The knowledge which is obscure, which is abstruse, which is false, should not be promoted. So with these words, I thank all the organizers, especially the Institute for Development Studies, AP, for having given me this opportunity to talk about, look at the India's independence movement in perspective. I also throw in a caveat at the end of it that these views are my personal, and at times these views are purely personal and they should not be quoted given in a reference as far as my professional uh, life is concerned. Thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you, Sri Sisodia, for an excellent and thought-provoking lecture on the philosophy of independence movement in India.